Okay, so this is a very quick intro, shall we say, into problems with the comprehension approach, the so-called comprehension approach to listening. Let's begin with a quick look at something from the British Council. Lots of really great resources, don't get me wrong, and I used to work for them. But the British Council website on receptive skills, and this gives a little clue as to one of the problems with how listening is conceptualized, in that it's sort of lumped together with reading. What I find problematic about this particular definition, or a couple of the key things, are this idea of it as a passive skill, listening and reading as well, as a passive skill, that there's nothing going on internally. And the fact that it's kind of characterized as a way of presenting new items, basically a model using in text as a way to present models of grammar and lexis, which you can then practice afterwards, rather than a skill to be developed in its own right. So that's a bit of a problem with the way we look at the concept, the construct maybe even of what listening in the classroom is. The comprehension approach, as called by John Field and criticised quite well in his book, Listening in the Language Classroom, looks something like this, doesn't it? This is from Scrivener, but it could be from any manner of methodology books looking at receptive skills procedures. So this holds for both reading and listening, but looking at listening today, what's the problem with this? Essentially, I suppose it's this sort of two-stage, three-stage, three-play listening model where there's a big lead-in. You build up lots of context. You pre-teach lots of lexis, perhaps. You then have them answer pre-presented questions. So they have the questions before they listen. So they're already given a sort of gratis schema of what the listening's about. You give them the answers. Maybe they shout these out. Maybe they got them, maybe they didn't, and that's it. Then you move on. Then you look at some of the phrasal verbs in the text, or you look at, I don't know, some of the uses of the past simple versus the past progressive. And that's the end of the listening section. It focuses very much on the product, the final answer, and very little on the process. How did you reach this answer? And very importantly, why didn't you reach the answer? What often doesn't happen with the comprehension approach, or what doesn't happen enough, is dealing with people who can't get the answer, exploring why they got different answers, and helping them overcome that problem, so that the next time they listen to something, they'll be better. One big problem with listening is the fact that it's often just today's text. We'll play this. These are the answers relating to this text. Did you get them? Great. Did you not? Never mind. It's kind of testing how good they are at today's particular, whatever it is, interview or news report or what have you. There's a really nice tongue-in-cheek blog post by Scott Thornbury that I recommend you go and take a look at, called Z, or Z if you prefer, is for zero uncertainty, and it kind of sends up this whole idea of a classic listening lesson. Do check it out. What about this? This is something that I've been guilty of saying, and is very common. I've taken this straight off the internet, just redacted from the teacher's name from this, but this is a really common thing to say. Don't worry if you don't understand everything, just keep listening. And this, again, isn't really addressing problems that students have. And let's take that Thornbury blog again. There's a lovely quote in it where he says this, they're used to not understanding things out there in the real world. In the classroom, surely our job is to help them reach as close as possible to sort of, zero uncertainty about a text as we can. How do we do that? Well, that will take a lot of preparation, looking at a transcript and thinking about, okay, what is going to block their understanding with this text today? And are there any things in this transcript which are generalizable across a variety of other texts? So is there a problem with this listening, which is a problem with listenings in general? And very often, especially up to a sort of upper intermediate level, the key things that block people's understanding are perceptual. So what we mean by that is simply phonology. Can they match the sounds that are coming into their ear? Can they match that into words they've got in their head? Can they do it, and can they do it quickly, automatically? in such a way that they've got more working memory to deal with the so-called higher level processes of building a discourse structure, meaning building, and what have you. A lot of people express skepticism. I like this post. This is stolen off Barcelona TEFL Teachers Association. Somebody expressing reservations about this whole comprehension approach that they were taught in their cert or in their CELTA, and you were, and I was, and I have taught as well. Does the comprehension approach help learners develop their skills or strategies? Does it help teachers? I don't think it does. Much better to focus on problems and take a sort of diagnostic approach, as John Field would say, to listening in the language classroom. Why does this comprehension approach continue? Now, if it's so bad, why is it managed to survive all of these criticisms? I suppose the key thing is it's easy to come up with a list of comprehension questions, and that's what characterizes the comprehension approach. You have a list of questions, you give it to the students, you play the recording, and then you say yes, no, you've got the answers. What happens at that stage, as I've said previously, is that, well, the students who didn't get the answers will then sort of scribble down all the answers, and then you'll move on to the grammar or the lexis or the meat of the lesson, if you like. That's not helped them whatsoever. It always makes me smile a little bit, actually, when students insist on writing down the answers after the listening bit's finished. It's like, it's over. The whole process of development has finished. It doesn't really matter whether or not your notebook has A, B, C written down in it in the correct order. What matters is whether or not your skills or a certain aspect of your skills has got better during the lesson. So here's a suggestion. This is very sort of simplified, shall we say. It's from a couple of years back of an IATEFL presentation that John Field gave, and you can find again in his Listening in the Language Classroom book. Essentially, this sort of procedure outlined. It's one procedure. It's not the only way to approach a listening lesson by any means. Here we've got some key aspects, I think, which are worth looking at. Prepare the lesson in detail. The preparation part before you go into the classroom is essential. Look at a tape script, take a highlighter, play the recording yourself, and just try and get used to hearing with the learner's ears, if you like. So what kind of chunks, what kind of stretches of speech will be particularly difficult for them to perceive? Will they say, huh, what was that? Is there something with lots of connected speech? Are things radically reduced? All the sort of stuff that Richard Cordwell deals with very well, talks about a lot, is worth listening out for. That happens before you get into the lesson. And the more you do that, the more you develop your own ear as a teacher for the sorts of problems students have. Now here, John says, abandon pre-listening. I have my reservations about that. I think it depends on level. But certainly I would agree that sometimes pre-listening can go on for far too long, and you take away the need to even play the recording in the first place. Here, John suggests in the first play, it's all about just getting used to the voices, listening for gist, listening globally, no focusing on questions. You don't give any questions, really. If you feel you must, then maybe it's even like, what are they talking about? That's the kind of question I set sometimes with authentic listenings. After that, you might set some questions. And after that, check and diagnose reasons for learners' answers. So get them to speak together, say, why did you say that? Maybe they hear these mondegreens, these sort of phantom words, they like those misheard song lyric kind of things. It's like, I thought you said this. I see why. It sounds very similar to something from the tape script there. And finally, replaying parts identified by you or the class as perceptually difficult. Maybe get the class to transcribe short sections. I think this is terrifically useful. Don't overload them. Choose a really short section, maybe 20 seconds, and say, okay, what exactly did they say? Not the overall kind of meaning, but what exactly did they say, the exact words. Try and get them to note down all those function words that they find so hard to perceive. Let's finish with this quote. It's from Paul Nation from a long time ago now, and he was talking about reading, but it can equally apply to listening, I think. How does today's teaching make tomorrow's text easier?